Little did I think last year in November and December when most of us were just starting to understand how bad Rafe Judkins had done Robert Jordan and The Eye of the World in the Wheel of Time Amazon series. There were a series of articles, however, that gave us hope for the coming new year. Never have hope. If 2022 has taught us something, don't have any hope. Now, I'm kidding, kind of, but 2022 was a brutal year. Let's run through the short list. I have a better idea. Let's not. Let's actually look at a video that I did early last year, looking forward to the potential of all the fantasy we were going to get. Are you ready for this? Because this one hurts. It was a couple of videos ago when I said that the media kept saying 2022 was going to be the year for fantasy genre properties. And it was, wasn't it? It was the year of fantasy genre properties. Number one on the list was, of course, Amazon's The Rings of Power, which had nothing to do with Tolkien and nothing to do with Middle Earth, and we got some spectacularly terrible visuals that I want to thank my good friend Nerdporial for being able to do the Gladriel on the horseback. There are a few that can look like Morfydd Clark the way he did. The Rings of Power broke me. I needed to actually take some time away from this channel and from covering pop culture because I had just had enough. I've talked about it in other videos, why I needed to do that. I may do that again, but in the meantime, I want to go over what we hoped we'd find something good in all of the fantasy that was supposed to come out this year. Of course, everybody's been talking about Amazon's Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. What we did and didn't get, the rumors about
it was
what
worse.
they're going to do with representation and swaps, identity politics, and God knows what else. The problem was, and I covered this show in advance quite a bit. I did a lot of digging. I looked at IMDb. I tried to look at the writers, at the producers, at where they were going, at what we knew was going to be there, at comments by people who were fired, let go, no longer part of a production that had no direct correlation to the world that Tolkien wrote, yet called itself The Rings of Power. Now, the problem with all this was, no matter how analytical and critical I was in a fair way of this show, there was absolutely no way anyone could have imagined it would have been as bad as it was. $1 billion. All right, let's go back to this. While obviously very important, the works of Tolkien, there are many other fantasy properties coming out that we should be thinking about.
Yeah,
HBO hopes to leverage their Game of Thrones prequel to the same stratospheric viewership and interest as the original Game of Thrones. So this is a show, actually, House of the Dragon, that, and I've talked about it with other YouTube creators like Zax and Prophet of the Dragon, Nerdporial, Manimanethrin. This was the show that we were pretty sure was going to suck the worst, was the House of the Dragon. Now, I watched all of the episodes, and there were probably two not so great, maybe 2.5 not so great episodes, including, in my opinion, the finale of season 1 of the House of the Dragon. However, it was decent. Overall, I think my average score for the season out of all of the episodes was about a 6.5, 6.25. Not perfect. B- on a good day, C+ on a bad. There were some great episodes, but the unevenness of the storytelling and the aging up of the characters was jarring. At the end of the day, though, I will say the House of the Dragon, to me, is probably in the, I would say, the number 3 of the top 3 things that I could say don't totally suck from 2022. But let's take a look. Let's see what foolish, naive me thought. We don't have a release date on that prequel. However, we do know. I do want to say this. HBO kicked Amazon in the nuts, and I loved every minute of it. What I really liked is that they came out before The Rings of Power, that they already got people talking about the show before Amazon dropped that abysmal damn thing they called The Rings of Power, and people were engaged. People were invested. And they also put the first episode of The House of the Dragon out on the internet on YouTube for free so anybody could watch it to get people hooked into the show. And it worked. It truly worked. Again, House of the Dragon was a very imperfect show. It had some darn good episodes, but it wasted Matt Smith. It really did. The real question is season 1 rewatchable? We'll have to find out. Let's watch more of my video. I'll shut up so I can talk. Ha. Everything seems to point to HBO holding off Game of Thrones until the second half of the year, which would exactly correspond with when Amazon drops The Ring, which is exactly what they did. And again, balls up, straight throat cutting move, rolling out before the billion-dollar disaster that was Amazon. In addition, Netflix is going to be dropping, yes, a prequel to The Witcher. Before we get into the prequel to The Witcher, let's talk about Witcher Season 2. Disappointing. I didn't actually finish the season because I was that disappointed. I went back to the books. I went back to watching the first season. I will finish watching Season 2 of The Witcher. I will. But it's a bad sign when you're someone who owns the books, physical and an ebook. You've read them a couple different times, and you cannot make it more than 2/3 of the way through a second season of a really fantastic character with a really deep story. That's on the writers or the writer. We all know what Henry Cavill has done. He says, "Kiss my White Witcher ass," and he walked out the door. And I applaud that. That will be called The Witcher Blood Origins, which apparently this is going to come out at the time of the recording of this. It's December, what the hell is it, 11th, 12th, 13th? I don't know. It's sometime. This hasn't come out yet, but by all looks of this, and again, the comments of the creatives, this is exactly what you expect. Intersectionalism, identity politics, hate the original core fans. I have no hope for this. I don't even know if I'm going to watch it, which sucks because I love Sapkowski's Witcher books. Apparently, I'm just a racist. That's the problem. They is very, very, very loosely based upon the original source material. Has Lizzo's dietary restrictions in an all-you-can-eat old country buffet. That's how loose creative this is. Material written by Polish author Andrzej Sapkowski. Read the books. Please, please do yourself a favor. Read the Witcher books by Andrzej Sapkowski. They're absolutely fantastic. Netflix is also dropping Neil Gaiman's The Sandman. This was shocking. This perhaps was more shocking to me than Amazon's The Rings of Power. Now, I watched this on the back end. I watched it with Purple Valkyrie and Wakazashi's Tea House. Now, Gray of Wakazashi's Tea House loves The Sandman, loved the stories. I appreciated this as a graphic novel for the time. Purple Valkyrie also loved this story and was a deep lore kind of a nerd on this book. The disgust, which has never been made public, which I still have recordings of.
I watched this trailer and I've been critical of this show pretty much from the beginning. As soon as we heard who was going to be cast, and let's be fair, very few of them actually look like the characters that they are meant to portray in the comic books. Now, people will say, well, they can look like anything they like. If that's the case, why don't they look the way that they're portrayed in that case?
Amen,
Yeah.
Purple.
I mean, it's not as if somebody actually not just wrote a book, but also drew every single scene for the entire story. And not only that,
like a storyboard.
but you know exactly what the characters look like. And then, of course, there's the lore around this, which was based upon several 80s and late 70s alt-rock and punk rock counterculture icons, including one of the main characters here who was actually race swapped and who actually has a named person. This is a woman who died not too long ago, who was very critical within the alt-rock, alt scene that existed. And to me, it's incredibly disrespectful because there was a deliberate reason why Neil Gaiman portrayed those characters the way that was done in the comic book. And to me, Netflix had no business changing it.
To be honest, a lot of this does fall on Neil himself as well, because he is heavily involved in this. If it was a case of where they'd taken his IP and they just kind of run with it, I could kind of see where they were going. But he is fully on board. He has been from the beginning, and he's actively defended this show multiple times on Twitter.
Yeah. Watching The Sandman by two people who I consider friends, colleagues, it was heartbreaking. I was bored most of this show. I didn't recognize the story they were showing, and part of the reason is I didn't recognize the characters. But more importantly, the pacing, the set, and the lighting were terrible. They took a dynamic, beautiful graphic novel from the late 80s and turned it into, I don't know what. It wasn't very good, but you know what it had was a lot of lesbian representation, especially for Joanna Constantine replacing John Constantine. Why? Because John Constantine had a penis and was a tough guy. So what did they need? They needed to have Joanna Constantine, who is a lesbian, in an interracial relationship, and who has time for the actual story written by Neil Gaiman. And then, of course, Neil Gaiman, in my opinion, like a bitch, calls me and anyone who read this book 30, 20 years ago a racist because we don't recognize the story that this asshole wrote. And you know whose fault that is? That asshole, not me as an audience member. As an audience member, I have a reasonable expectation to recognize characters. You know what's really easy to make a TV show of? A comic book. Do you know why? It doesn't just have dialogue like a book. It has effing pictures of the effing characters saying the dialogue. You know how if you cast something and you make a story about something based upon a graphic novel or a comic book, maybe the person on screen who has the name from your effing graphic novel should look like the effing graphic novel. But I digress. It was about a year ago when all of us learned all of the pronouns for the characters from the original Neil Gaiman book. It's just a shit show. I mean, it's a shit show. And at the time when all of this information came out, it seems like a million years ago, we thought we could win this war. We thought we were being heard. They heard us. The problem was, in my opinion, I don't think a lot of us understood that we were integral to the weird mind control destruction of Western civilization, where they keep poking us with a stick to get us to say that's not what it's supposed to be because it gave their shit tier project attention. And the more bitching and moaning we did, we hoped they would hear it because we were providing feedback as a consumer and as a fan of the source material in good faith. The problem is there's been no good faith in any of these things, any of these properties that we talked about, especially The Sandman was one of the most despicable and disappointing non-adaptations since Resident Evil. And of course, looks like a lot of characters were made to look very different than they were in the original story. Not to be outdone, Disney Plus is going to be redoing the 1980. I gotta stop. When I recorded this, if you would have said to me, Salty, you know that Willow thing that they're making on Disney Plus? Do you know what the selling point is going to be? Is that front and center are going to be interracial gay relationships in Disney's family Willow. Can't even say it. Willow TV show. And that, the writers will say it only felt organic to make this gay dwarves in Willow. It just, if I don't laugh, I'm going to cry.
Film by Ron Howard.
It wasn't a good film. I didn't go see this, and I was the right age and the right demographic when this movie came out. This movie was a box office failure. So Disney took a box office failure, added gay, and now can play victim when it fails on streaming. Genius, isn't it? Yeah, go look at Disney stock prices. They got the world on a string.
Willow, of course, and Val Kilmer and Warwick Davis starred in what was originally a George Lucas idea.
Big mistake, Warwick.
Interestingly enough, Warwick Davis will be back for this series as well.
He regrets it.
Also interesting, AMC is going to be doing their own version of Interview with a Vampire. Of course,
I bet you never guess what they did with it. They made it all gay all the time. They replaced the original they swapped in sexuality swapped. A pretty good story from the 80s. It was a moment in time written by Anne Rice. It was a phenomena in the United States. Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt did a really shitty on-screen version of it, but the story itself, a good read, especially the vampire Lestat. It's not a bad read.
Of course, that will be based upon the Anne Rice novels that were so popular in the 1980s. Of course,
Wheel of Time. You know, I met a lot of really cool people here on YouTube talking about the Wheel of Time. I met Amanda Manethrin. I met Kyle Zax7. I met Prophet of the Dragon, Nerdporial. I met some of the people from the White Cloaks. I also did videos about what Reddit did to the White Cloaks before they started a YouTube channel by shadow banning and then hard banning them because they were being objectively critical of what Rafe Judkins did with the characters and world that Robert Jordan created. If you have seen one moment of season 1 of The Wheel of Time, you will know this is not Robert Jordan's world. Now, we can run down the usual list of intersectional horseshit. What you also found in this was neo-Marxism. You found a lot of intersectionalism, sexuality swaps. You, of course, had female characters who were virtuous and pure and had to be trained to how to do things, being the bestest ever and kind of sluts, because why not? Because my patriarchy. But The Wheel of Time has been and never will be the world of Robert Jordan. This is a fetish by a man-child who threatened the fans of the original books of this series. Again, The Eye of the World, written by Robert Jordan, with, if we didn't stop complaining about what he did in season 1, he would turn even more of the characters from the books gay and trans. There's a threat from the creator of the show on Amazon to the fans who just want to see the world and characters that they love without the fetishization and sexualization of a man-child who is in serious need of therapy for his daddy issues. Yeah, Rafe, I'm looking at you. Well, we've got pictures of season 2. Looks a little BDSM, a little hot gay sex. And because there weren't enough women, Rafe Judkins decided to invent yet another Aes Sedai. You know, this is not a Wheel of Time video. Let's just say that Rafe Judkins decided to triple down on full idiots and absolute talentless hack. And the latest rumors as of mid-December is it's not even going to cover the next book or the third book either. But hey, keep calling it the Wheel of Time. as long as it's got the gay in it, right? Amazon will also be returning with their air quotes adaptation of the second season of A Wheel of Time. Salty, you're a liar. It's not an adaptation, it's a non-adaptation. Get it right, dickhead. And depending upon how you look at it, we can also lump in Stranger Things. Perhaps the one redeeming show, and surprise, not like little surprise, like, oh, wow, I want a free bag of popcorn. Like, no, like this, I committed the day of my life to watching the show. This was a darn good story. Wasn't perfect, but I loved the characters. I liked the return to what made Stranger Things good. Okay, season 3 was mediocre. Season 2 was not good at all. Season 1 was the GOAT, right? It's hard to duplicate the success, but Stranger Things season 4 had things that matter to me. And I remember watching this with Steve, Prophet of the Dragon, and others. And what was good about this is there were stakes. The characters had issues. They were not Mary Sue's. As a matter of fact, the Mary Sue for this got her ass kicked and became a prisoner of that which had made her a Mary Sue. Go watch Stranger Things season 4. It is a hell of a commitment. But out of everything that I watched this year, Stranger Things season 4 is probably the number one thing that I enjoyed the most out of anything. Not to mention how it made Kate Bush popular again. I've always had a Kate Bush crush. I have her on vinyl behind me. So that was it. That was the promise of what 2022 was. What do we have coming in 2023? Well, if you were hoping for a Chris Pine in Dungeons and Dragons with forced multiculturalism and undoubtedly trans representation and homosexuality in your Dungeons and Dragons, well, that apparently is what you're going to be getting in 2023. It looks like a Witcher season 3, maybe with maybe Henry Cavill. I don't know, but it doesn't matter because it's not really The Witcher because the writer wants to move away from the source material. You know where I'm going with that. What are the lessons that I took away from 2022? Honestly, no matter how bad you think something is going to be, as a fan, we still assume there's going to be a ground floor or there's maybe a basement. What you don't expect is that there's going to be 20,000 layers of sub-basement of hell. That is what Payne and McKay did with the Rings of Power. They quite literally went beyond the wildest idiocy and asshattery that I, as a normal human being, could have come up with and went to a whole other place. It's probably what they're going to do with The Witcher. Let's be honest, that's pretty much what Disney did with Marvel Phase 4. It's what Disney's done with Star Wars, in my opinion. Here we are. Is there anything coming in 2023 that I'm looking forward to? No, there's not. I wish there was. You know what I look forward to, though? It's watching my physical media. I'm finding a lot of really great things. I'm also talking to people from other cultures to try and learn about things that they love and they care about. Some of these are live action shows, there's anime, there's manga, but there's also older things from the 70s and 80s and other cultures, especially UK stuff that's out there. We all want something new and shiny. We all want the hero's journey. We all want the big payoff. We want to have creatives who give a shit about the source material and want to put a good story on screen, not to re-educate, not to make us feel bad about my climate, not to make us want to get our 18th booster, but just entertain. I wish I had good news, but I'm not going to lie to you. What do you think? 2022 was the year of fantasy. I'm sure I missed something. There were a lot of shit shows that got canceled. I'm not covering them. Things on Netflix that lasted a couple episodes. But this was the original story and the original article that I covered. And I wanted to do this weird meta thing and just hang out with you because the year's almost over. And in between eggnog and bourbons, I thought I'd shoot this live video. So thanks for hanging with me. I'll see you again soon. I know I've said it before, but I'm Salty Travel and See. I hope you're having a great Christmas. Be good to yourself, and be even better to those who love you. I'll see you soon.